First item on the agenda is apologies. I have one apology from Councillor Deacon. Any other apologies? Councillor McLaughlin?
Councillor advised another meeting in Enniskillen, which runs the same time. He has to go to it.
Councillor McGuire, did you? Sorry. Prior to
Aye, Councillor Tomas O'Reilly.
O'Reilly and Councillor Garrity.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Coyle, I think, is hoping to log on to start. He might have to go on a trip to Derry then, so he might have to go offline. So just
Yeah,
make
Councillor
sure.
Coyle's online here as well.
Yeah, and there you go. Thanks.
Okay, item 2 then is any declarations of interest. Declarations. Item 3 then is to consider the delegated files called in for decision by the Planning Committee. That's paper C, and I'm going to ask Darren to there's a few updates on that.
So good morning, members. So I'll just take you through the two applications. Paper C, then application 4, LA10 2020-618, Newtown application for dwelling on a farm for Mr. McFadden on lands approximately 200 metres west of 28 Racopa Road in Omagh. And the recommendation then is to refuse planning permission. Just to provide members with a couple of updates, following the meeting last week, the applicant has sent in an additional letter which was received on the 24th of September relating to the application and presenting a case in support of the application. In addition, there was also a letter of objection received from a planning consultant on the 27th of September, so yesterday at 5:20. That letter of objection raises issues. Members. Okay. Yeah, so the just to go back then, so the letter of objection received from a planning consultant on the 27th of September, so yesterday at 5:20. That letter of objection raises issues objecting to the application and raises a number of points. That, given it was so late in the day, that was sent on to the applicant who has seen it and has asked for the application to be withdrawn from the agenda to allow them to consider the issues raised in that objection. So the view of officers would be that that would be an appropriate thing to do, given it was received so late in the day. So officers would suggest today that members agree to withdrawing the application from the agenda to allow the applicant to consider the objection letter that was received yesterday at 5:20.
Okay, that's proposed by Councillor Garrity and seconded by Councillor McGuire. An agreement? Members?
Okay, so just to confirm there, members, for those with speaking rights, the application has been deferred to allow the applicant to consider the letter of objection that has been received, and the application will be brought back then at the next planning committee meeting.
Okay, members, so item 5 then is LA10 2021-0684 F, that's a single-story farm dwelling. That's Darren to take us.
So application number 5 then, members, is LA10 2021-0684. It's a full application then for Mr. McGarity at Lack Road in Urbanstown for a single-story farm dwelling. The recommendation then is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 3 reasons. Just to provide members with an update that the planning agent has contacted the planning office to advise that he's not able to attend today because he's actually travelling, and he was available at the previous meeting last Wednesday, if you recall, but wasn't aware that the follow-up meeting would be today, so wasn't able to keep that free in his diary. So he has requested the application is deferred until the next planning committee meeting, just to allow him to come along and avail of speaking rights.
Okay, members, would we be happy to defer the application? Councillor McGuire.
So proposed, Chair.
Second. Councillor Robinson.
Second that.
Okay, members, that we're all in agreement.
Happy to support, Chairman.
Mr. Rennie. Okay.
So the application LA 10, 2021-0684 has been deferred to be presented at the next planning committee meeting.
Okay, members, item 4 then is the planning appeals update for July and August 2021, paper F, and Sinead will take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. So item 4 then, paper F. So this is our planning appeal update for July and August 2021. So since our last committee meeting, we've had one appeal by the Planning Appeals Commission. And that was the appeal was in respect of a shop sign and a totem sign. So it was a respective application. And it was at the Spar at 27 Rosary Church Road, Enniskillen. So the application was refused by council officers under delegated authority. And obviously then the applicant decided to go to appeal, and the appeal was heard by Commissioner McShane, who allowed the appeal in part. So the consent to display the shop sign was refused, and the consent to display the totem pole sign was granted. So just looking very briefly then at a couple of the key points. In terms of the summary of the decision, the site is within the settlement limit of Enniskillen. It's at an existing petrol filling station with a forecourt and canopy. And the issue in this appeal was the impact of the advertisements on amenity. So what we mean by that is its effect upon the appearance of the building or structure or the immediate neighbourhood where it's displayed, or its impact over long distance views. So in terms of the shop sign was refused, and the Commissioner found that as a sign protrudes above roof level and partially covers the red trim detailing that characterises this part of the building. It relates purely to the building to which it is attached, and it is not of an appropriate size and scale. And they've said that notwithstanding limited views, it has an unacceptable impact upon the host building. So whilst there was reference to other fascia signs in Enniskillen, these were not considered to justify approval of the appeal proposal, which is contrary to policy. And it's within that context then the Commission decided that the Council's objection to the shopfront sign was sustained. In relation to the totem sign then, the totem pole has been erected and stands on a strip of grass to the southwest of the appeal site. The new totem would replace the totem pole that has stood in the centre of the frontage since 1979. And the Commissioner decided that when travelling from Featherbed towards the appeal site and along Rosary Church Road, the totem pole reads against existing development and mature trees, and similarly travelling in the opposite direction. And judging from the photographs supplied and comparing the views, the Commissioner found that any difference in size and scale with that was previously in place is insignificant. They've said the totem pole does not appear in isolation and it does not dominate the streetscape. And individually, it does not have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the area. So the Commissioner decided that the Council failed to sustain its objection in relation to the totem sign and granted retrospective advertising consent for it. So the recommendation is that members note the update on the planning appeals.
The note, Chair.
Seconder here, just to note that. Councillor Freely.
Chair, no, content with the two opposing seconder. Just one question, Sinead. It says when the Commissioner is looking at it from photos, my question is, did they come down and have a site visit, the Commissioner? Just wondering for my own information. Or do we know that? So,
I'm not sure from the report just that I have summarised, but they normally would make a site visit. Commissioners normally would do that.
it just read a bit through the chair. I'd read a bit that it was just too based on photos, and I just wondered for myself. But I think it would warrant site visits.
So I'm not sure that they have done, but I can check that if you want me to follow up.
No, it's just if it's not much bother, but it's just not too concerning. But happy to agree with the proposal second.
Okay, members. Sorry, members. Item 5 then is to look at the report on the planning advice notice, PAN, on implementation of regional planning policy for development in the countryside. That's paper G for your information. Councillor McElduff.
Chair, I'm not sure if it was the officer's intention to maybe make a statement about the content of this, but if not, I'll give my take on it. Okay. Chair, I actually see this as the department interfering because they have devolved, some planning responsibilities to local government authorities. And, the SPPS, the Strategic Planning Policy Statement, a lot of us would view that as being already restrictive, policies, not to our liking, as rural representatives. And it appears that in this matter, the issuing of a planning advice notice, that there hasn't been public consultation. And it could be argued that, for example, in paragraph 2.3 and also in paragraph 2.5, that it amounts to a material change to the policy, because in previous iterations of the policy, there is no reference to would not include a dwelling and domestic garage only, as in 2.3. So all in all, I know that I'm aware that for example, other rural groups have made their views known on this, that is not acceptable. I mean, even to revise what is acceptable by way of infill will have a detrimental impact on rural applications, which are sustainable. So I do think it is interfering. I do think that it's wrong that there hasn't been any public consultation, and it's wrong to impose additional limitations on an already restrictive policy. I think it amounts to material change, and in respect of the clustering requirements now, and also the revised definition of infill, I think that's very substantive changes which have not been consulted on. So I would propose that this committee write to the Minister for Infrastructure seeking the withdrawal of this planning advice note. So I'm formally making the proposal that we seek the withdrawal of this PAN. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'll say a few words about this as well. That's just kind of coming in as a kind of a farmer living in the countryside, and I'm aware of all other local farmers are very concerned by this planning issue, and they are calling for local voices to be heard on the matter as well. It's a major worry for me that farmers and their families, like we all know, it takes more than one generation to run a farm. Everybody helps out, from the father, the son, the daughter, even the grandparents help out. And the grandparents to pass on their knowledge and experience to the rest of us. And as I always say, the farmers are the custodians of the countryside and the environment. And I think if this plan is upheld, it will have a very bad effect on rural families, and looking for replacement dwellings. So I'll be second Barry's proposal.
Okay, members. Certainly, I share the concerns of the two members who've spoken. So we have a proposal and a seconder there. Councillor McGuire.
And just a question that I would have on the basis of this, and again from the point of view of lack of consultation with the rural councils, even I think it states within the document that the minister had received advice from consultants, planning consultants. I'm aware that we have agents in this area that certainly wouldn't have come to the same conclusion as those planning consultants. So I would ask the question, who are these consultants that advise the minister, and do they bother to come west of the Bann to consult with either our neighbouring council, which again has opposed this PAN, and ourselves in this area? No prior consultation with ourselves directly, nor indeed any consultation with the agents that represent our rural dwellers here in the West. So the whole process of ministers coming to a conclusion and sending out a PAN which restricts what I find is already a restrictive process, it needs to be questioned, and I think we should seek information as to who are the advisors that advise the minister, And are the same advisors or consultants willing to come and meet with us as a council to voice their opinions as to how they came to the conclusions they came to? Because certainly within this meeting, over the number of years I've been on it, we have been struggling very hard under the existing directives to try and achieve what we want for our people, which is another generation living on the farm that can sustain the farms, that are the custodians of our farms and our land and our environment. And we've voiced that at other committees within the council, that the whole emphasis and the whole work going forward is that we need our farmers on board with all the issues pertaining to the environment, climate change, etc. And for a consultant group to advise a minister that we should further tighten the access to dwellings in the countryside, I think it should be questioned. Who are the consultants, and will they come down to meet us as a council?
And would Councillor McAuliffe and Feely be content to include that in the proposal? That just clarification around the consultant in this instance. Any other members wish to make comment? And are we all in agreement with the proposal?
Happy to support, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Okay, members, and as our officers need to make comment on that, your Sinead.
Just going to to note just in the report that we had made just a recommendation that we would have a workshop with members, and if members want to do that to discuss it in more detail with ourselves, we're happy to do that, but obviously also take on board the recommendation to write to the FI. So that recommendation is there. I'm just noting that it's there.
Thank you, Sinead. So we have that recommendation also. Councillor Maguire.
Sorry, just on the back of that, Sinead, thanks for that. A workshop among ourselves and yourselves, we would be just saying the same as we say all the time. I think the discussion needs to be widened out to include representative groups from the area. I do believe that the agents have an organisation of themselves. They do come together and meet. They certainly would need to be in any discussion. And I would even broaden it as far as to the Ulster Farmers Union and other representative groups of rural farmers and any other organisations. It would have to be much broader than just coming down to meet us. I think it needs to be discussed fully at this time.
Councillor McClahey.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with a lot of what the other speakers have said, and thinking back previously to one of the other, we have, not myself, but other councillors have sat for 5 years, I think, bringing forward a local development plan. And this council, well, the most of the councillors believed it is a sound development plan, and yet we're seeing people from South Belfast and wherever they set up there where Stormont is, they're sending down to tell us in Fermanagh and Omagh what we can do. Why did they bother asking us to come up with a sound plan for our area if they don't listen to us? What was the point in doing it? Why did these councillors waste 5 years and fight? And I came in at the tail end of it, and it was a battle to get, we spent hours upon hours upon hours, and other councillors spent even more hours in the actual committee that were working group. It seems quite strange now that something we thought was sound is now having extra criteria placed on it, and it seems strange to me, why they take that view. So that's my opinion on it, and I'm sure the other councillors agree with me.
Came in a second.
Chair, members, can I just clarify then, would it be preferable that we make representations through the correspondence at this point and await the outcome of that, and then at that point we can determine an approach towards a workshop? And just also to note at item 7.1 agenda, we do have correspondence from the Committee for Infrastructure seeking comments in respect of this matter, so we're content that we would forward the proposal from today then to the Committee for Infrastructure also. And we will revisit the proposal for a workshop when we receive further information.
Members all content, yeah? All in agreement? Thank you, members. So item 6 then is a public consultation from the Department for Communities on conservation principle guidance for sustainable management of the historic environment in Northern Ireland. So paper H.
Chair, just take members just a brief look at the paper. So the purpose of the report then is obviously just to provide members with details of the correspondence, and then there's a draft suggested response then at Appendix 1. So the consultation document is looking at conservation principles. So it's guidance for the sustainable management of the historic environment in Northern Ireland. And the consultation period runs until the 8th of October. The document explains that it's the first of a two-part publication on the department's conservation principles for the sustainable management of our historic environment. And it explains that part 2 will set out how to apply these principles, and this will be provided to councils for comment in due course. So the purpose of the document really is to set out best practice conservation-led framework to involve all aspects of decision making, which will affect our historic environment, and to then reconcile its protection with the economic and social needs and aspirations of our communities. So the document explains what the background is in terms of who it will impact, and it explains that it has been referred to for guidance by the following groups. So owners and people responsible for looking after heritage assets, developers and their consultant teams, and then policymakers and decision makers in central government and local authorities. And the conservation principles within the guidance will help inform the functions by the Historic Environment Division in terms of the work that they do. And it sets out the 6 conservation principles that are listed at paragraph 2.3 there of the report. The consultation explains that the 6 conservation principles are consistent with the approach in other jurisdictions to ensure clear and shared approach across the islands. And then it notes that the publication then is tailored to the process in terms of our historic environment in Northern Ireland. The consultation then goes on to explain this concept of significance and how it lies at the core of the principles. And it explains then how significance is considered, that it's evidence-based. And it explains that obviously because it's an evidence-based process, that when looking at significance, then there's a requirement to submit a statement of significance as part of that process. And then finally, there's a section then in terms of managing change to our heritage asset and a setting, and it explains the context for that. So there's a suggested draft response at Appendix 2 to the report. The consultation document does pose a series of questions. And it's just to note that what we're saying really in the response is, whilst the council could generally support the approach of the guidance, there's a number of areas that should be clarified in order to ensure that we're clear as to how the principles will be applied, and that the approach is appropriate to all those involved with our historic environment. So if I can just take us very briefly then to the response at Appendix 2 to the report. So in terms of the questions, we've obviously posed an answer to a couple of the questions, and not each one in detail. So I suppose just in terms of agreeing the overall approach to the conservation principles, what we're saying is we're generally supportive of the approach, but it's essential that clarification is provided as to how this will be applied to ensure that it's appropriate to all involved. And whilst it's recognised that the document will be read alongside the second part, we just need to be clear, I suppose, in terms of who will use it. So for example, I'm thinking maybe very specifically here in terms of planning policy. Obviously, whenever we engage in our planning process, we have planning policy documents and guidance documents. So it is clear that it's a high-level document, but I think it needs to be explained in the document how it relates to and its relationship with other documents and policies that also seek to manage and protect our historic environment. In terms of the answer to question 4, in terms of whether we agree or disagree with the proposed 6 principles, obviously we're saying we're supportive of the conservation principles, and we've set out some detail there in terms of our own historic environment. And obviously some of that detail comes from our local development plan and the objectives of our local development plan. And then moving on down to question 5 and 6 in terms of agreeing the approach in terms of understanding significance and this whole idea of the assessment of significance. What we're saying there is that it's unclear just how the document will be applied, and we need to understand how this evidence-based process will impact in terms of the work we do as a local council, and I suppose very specifically in terms of the work we do in terms of our planning process. So those are just, I suppose, the very high level points from the actual response. So in terms of the recommendation then, members, the recommendation is that members note the report and agree that the response at Appendix 2 is submitted to DFC as a response to the consultation.
Okay, members, so you've seen the appendix and Sinead has talked us through the response. Are we all happy with that response to the consultation? Just need a proposer then to note the contents of the report and to agree the response. Councillor McClary.
I'll propose.
Opposed, seconded by Councillor Garrity. Thank you. So item 7 then is correspondence. And I think we've dealt with 7.1 already in our previous item. So 7.2, any other correspondence?
So just to note then, 7.2 is correspondence that has just been received from DFI. And just to look very briefly at it then, so DFI have written to us just to advise that the Minister for Infrastructure has decided to commence work on a review of strategic planning policy on oil and gas development, including development involving fracking. So in addition then, and preceding the outcome of the policy review, the Minister has also issued a direction, and the direction is entitled the Planning Notification of Applications Petroleum Direction 2021. And that new direction specifically requires that a council planning authority must notify the Department for Infrastructure when it proposes to grant planning permission for all types of petroleum development. And that direction then is attached to the correspondence. And you'll note that the direction comes into operation on the 20th of September, so it has come into effect. And it means then if we have planning applications where we're proposing to grant planning permission for petroleum development, then we would have to comply with the direction and notify the department.
Proposer to note that correspondence? Councillor Maguire.
I'm happy to propose and to welcome that, Chair.
And do you have a seconder, Councillor John Coyle?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, I would like to welcome this piece of policy and that council staff will adhere to what is written out in the policy, that we have made our position clear in the council in the past, and this is just another, safeguard to our position. Thank you.
Okay, members, we're all in agreement. That. Item 8 then is any other urgent and relevant business. And I suppose I want to note that the special council meeting, there has been an email sent regarding this tomorrow night. The notification has been withdrawn, so that meeting is cancelled. Any other urgent business? No? In that case, thank you all for joining the reconvened meeting, and the meeting is ended. Thank you.